In my MLI, I will be seeking to make a connection between the musical techniques of both Bach and Oscar Peterson. The pieces I will be comparing are that of an excerpt from Bach's Brandenburg Concerto and Oscar Peterson's Hymn to Freedom. In essence, I will be comparing the musical elements outlined in the Baroque era to that of the musical elements that define jazz. It would be very difficult to find a historical link between these two genres because not only did they originate in different time periods, they also originated from different places in the world. Jazz was a musical style that developed into what it was through many years of cultural change. Jazz music originated in Africa as tribe music, and as the slaves were brought over to America in the 1600s, it evolved into its own genre of music that is known today as jazz. Baroque music grew to be what it was as the modern life of Europe changed from the Renaissance era to that of the Baroque era. This also occurred around the 1600s. In doing research on these two genres of music, I discovered two key similarities between both pieces of music. Bach's ornamentation is similar to jazz improvisation, and those same ornaments serve the purpose of providing syncopation the same way the musical style of jazz does. Some other similarities between these two pieces of music are the walking bass that starts on G in Bach's Goldberg variations and ends on B, that jazz music replicates consistently. Both of these pieces are also played very slowly and freely in order to allow time for the ornamentation and improvisation. This illustrates a link between rhythmic variety and tempo. In his career, Bach, born in 1685 Eisenach, Germany, became a highly skilled and respected organist and harpsichordist in the Baroque period. It is known that Bach, in his attempt to identify his own musical style, adopted rhythms and other examples from musical texture from foreign countries such as Italy and France. Bach's signature combination of polyphonic texture and rich harmony is illustrated in his Goldberg variations. These 30 variations raise the genre of keyboard variations to a new level of artfulness. However, he manages to preserve the bass and harmonic structure of the theme, a sarabande. Oscar Peterson, born in Montreal, Canada on August 15, 1925, was a famous jazz pianist who won 8 Grammy Awards and was well known for his speed, dexterity, and swing at any tempo. He was also criticized for using so many notes. At the time Bach wrote the Goldberg Variations, there was no such thing as a walking bass. However, the bass line in Goldberg Variations is very similar to what modern musicians nowadays refer to as a walking bass. The definition of a walking bass by Google: a bass part in 4/4 time in which a note is played on each beat of the bar and which typically moves up and down the scale in small steps. Within the first few measures, the left hand begins to provide harmonic and rhythmic support by playing an ascending G major broken chord triad with every note being played on the beat. Also, each triad in the following measures descends in stepwise motion down the G major scale until the left hand plays a C major triad. For example, GBD in the first measure, then F sharp A D in the second measure, and so forth. The only difference between this rhythmic and harmonic support and a walking bass, according to Google, is that the meter of Goldberg Variations is in 3/4 and not in 4/4. In Hymn to Freedom, the first and most evident example of walking bass occurs in both measures 7 and 8. The bass line moves in parallel motion with the melody a third lower, reinforcing the melody. This stepwise motion aids the structural integrity of the piece, seeing as up until this point in the piece has been mainly disjunct, meaning skips and intervals, as opposed to conjunct, meaning stepwise motion. To summarize, the harmonic line links both songs through the use of a walking bass and reinforced tonic notes in the bass. In these same starting measures, Bach inserts an ornament in the form of a trill. Next, in measure 2, he adds an appoggiatura in the left hand. Both of these ornaments help to develop the melody. They do this by outlining the fact that the melody is a lyrical one. They also allow the player the chance to improvise somewhat with the piece, which emphasizes the melody's lyrical nature. Moreover, ornamentation is a musical feature that Bach was known to use extensively in his works, which depicts a correlation between both eras' musical preferences, as jazz is known for improvisation. Through analyzing the use of syncopation, Hymn to Freedom, we can compare the melodic development of both songs. The first example of syncopation is provided in the first measure when Peterson transitions from a D major chord to a G minor chord on the offbeat of beat 4 using the C note as a passing tone. This helps move the melody along smoothly. Oscar Peterson uses the same technique 2 measures later when transitioning from a fully diminished chord to a minor chord using a passing tone. The minor chord is then played on the offbeat of beat 4 to emphasize the syncopation. In conclusion, the melodic development in both pieces makes it clear that there is a link between jazz syncopation and Bach's ornamentation. As mentioned earlier, the trills and appoggiaturas in Bach's Goldberg variations allow for the player to improvise with the piece. Jazz music is known for improvisation and bases a lot of its music around it. That being said, by definition, it is impossible to provide visual evidence for improvisation. However, there are instances within Hymn to Freedom that one could potentially improvise. Take measures 43 and 44, for example. In using an excessive amount of triplets and sextuplets, the arranger of this piece is making an effort to mimic the style in which Oscar Peterson improvises. Measures 43 to 44 also provide another musical link. Here, Peterson writes 2 sextuplet runs for the right-hand part. This then transitions into a triplet with multiple grace notes for the left-hand part. Not only does this triplet in the left hand provide rhythmic variety, but it also allows for a smooth transition between melody and harmony. Through the added succession of notes in the harmony, a musical link is provided between both songs by means of rhythmic variety. The end of Bach's walking bass is where the harmonic line becomes more rhythmically challenging. In measure 7, Bach adds in the left hand 8th notes, 16th notes, and in measure 8, ornaments. This helps develop rhythmic variety in the harmonic line. As the song progresses, it becomes clear that Bach has spared no expense in writing as many ornamentations as possible in order to increase rhythmic variety. Bach does this in the form of trills, trills with termination, and trills with prefix from above, turns, appoggiaturas, and lastly, broken chord arpeggiations. In order to compensate for the abundance of ornamentation, Bach writes changes in the tempo so that the beginning variation can be played slowly and freely. This tempo change is also seen in Peterson's work. This correlation is made evident through the sextuplet and triplet runs and grace notes mentioned previously throughout the song. In order for a pianist to perform these accents and ornamentations cleanly and correctly, Peterson was forced to write this song at a slower tempo. The rapid succession of notes and ornamentations allow for a final link between the two songs. This link is that of tempo fluctuation. Both Bach and Oscar Peterson utilize many similar musical and stylistic elements in their respective pieces. They both use a form of rhythmic and harmonic support in the bass line, they both use a form of syncopation, they both use a form of improvisation, and they both use a similar form of rhythmic tempo and variation. The most significant musical link between these two pieces comes from Bach's ornamentation, as it serves the purpose of syncopation and improvisation, which are two similarities between both musical works. The way in which ornaments are written and played closely parallels that of the free and unorthodox improvisation of the jazz period. On a less significant note, both Peterson and Bach apply identical musical features in their respective forms of improvisation. There is a close correlation between grace notes in Peterson's music and appoggiaturas in Bach's music. Not to mention, they both use broken chord arpeggiation.